I knew something was wrong the second I stepped into the house. After a 12-hour trauma shift, my body felt like it had been stitched together with borrowed strength, but nothing compared to the heaviness that settled in my chest as I pushed open the kitchen door. The lights were on. Voices carried from the living room. I smelled something burnt and something sweet, the kind of chaos that never signaled anything good. I dropped my bag onto the counter and leaned against the doorway for balance. My scrubs were still stiff with the scent of antiseptic dried sweat and the metallic whisper of blood from patients I had treated hours earlier. I had been living here again for 3 weeks while saving money after my breakup, and every day I told myself it was temporary. Just a pause. Just a place to breathe. But tonight, the air felt different. Tense. Crowded. Tilting. My mother's voice floated through the hall, high-pitched and strangely bright. She only sounded like that when she was overcompensating. My father was talking too, his tone low and coaxing the way he spoke to anxious patients, even though he was not the one with medical training. And then I heard a third voice. Young, shaky, a girl. I frowned, dropped my keys into the bowl, and stepped further inside. That is when I saw her, a girl sitting on our couch, knees pulled to her chest, black hair falling in messy strands across her face. Her hands rested protectively over a small but unmistakable curve in her abdomen, a pregnancy belly. She looked around 21 or 22, wearing a sweatshirt that was too thin for January and shoes that looked like she had walked miles in them. Beside her, Jason paced back and forth like a dog guarding a territory he had just discovered. My older brother, 28, always restless, always unpredictable, always 2 breaths away from someone else's mess. He froze when he saw me. Maddie, you are home. His voice carried a warning, a sort of territorial bark that made my stomach tighten. Mom shot up from her seat and hurried toward the girl. Sweetie, ignore the noise. You are safe here. You can stay as long as you need. Dad nodded and gave her a warm smile meant to reassure. This is what we do for family, he said. I blinked, still trying to understand what I had walked into. Who is she? I asked slowly. Jason stepped between me and the couch. This is Ariana. She is moving in with us for now. She is pregnant and her family kicked her out. He said it with the tone of someone delivering a verdict rather than sharing news. My mother patted the girl's shoulder with a tenderness I had not received since childhood. Poor thing has had such a rough time. She needs support. Real support. I forced a breath into my lungs. That is awful, I murmured. But when did this happen? Jason shrugged and glanced at Ariana like she might break if he used the wrong words. We just left her parents' house. Things got loud. They told her not to come back with that baby. My parents' faces twisted with sympathy, and for a moment I felt it too. I worked in trauma medicine. I had seen what abandonment did to people, but something was off. Jason was too wound up, too defensive. And my parents had not asked about my 12-hour shift or even noticed I was still standing in the doorway. I walked toward the sink to pour a glass of water, needing space to process the situation. My legs trembled with exhaustion. My head throbbed with the familiar post-shift fog. Jason followed me, footsteps, heavy breath, uneven. Do not start anything. Maddie, he said quietly. I froze. Start anything? I am literally drinking water. Ariana whimpered from the couch, a small, frightened sound. My mother rushed to her, shushing her like a child. You are stressing her, Jason snapped. You walked in here with your attitude, and now look what you did. My throat tightened. What attitude? I just walked through the door. Dad stepped closer, hands raised in some misguided attempt at mediation. Maddie, your brother and Ariana have been through a lot tonight. Try not to escalate anything. I turned to him, stunned. Escalate? I have not said or done anything. Jason stepped closer, too close, the old familiar heat in his eyes. The heat I had learned to avoid since we were children. You are always judging, he hissed, always looking at me like I am a problem. Maybe that is why Ariana is upset. Maybe she feels your negativity. Ariana whimpered again. Tears started sliding down her cheeks. I took a step back, trying to defuse the situation. Jason, stop. She is scared and I am exhausted. I am not fighting with you." I reached for the cabinet to grab a glass, and that tiny movement was all it took. Jason lunged forward. His hand collided with my shoulder and shoved hard. My back slammed into the corner of the lower cabinet. Pain shot through my ribs, hot and electric, and I slid to the floor, breath knocked out of me. My palm slapped the tile as I tried to steady myself. The room spun once, twice. Ariana cried harder. My mother gasped, but instead of rushing to me, she ran to Ariana, cradling her face, telling her it was okay. Dad knelt beside the couch, murmuring reassurances to her, not to me. I lay on the cold kitchen floor, pulse pounding behind my eyes, ribs throbbing from the impact. Jason hovered over me, breathing hard. "Look what you did," he said. "You scared her." My mother snapped at me without looking in my direction. "Maddie, stop making a scene. You know she cannot handle stress right now." I stared up at them, dazed, the edges of my vision flickering. I was the one on the floor. I was the one who had been hit. Yet somehow in this house that did not matter. I realized something chilling in that moment. They had already chosen a side, and it was not mine. I locked my bedroom door with fingers that still shook from the impact, the echo of the kitchen scene replaying in sharp, painful fragments behind my eyes. My ribs throbbed with every breath, a dull ache radiating beneath the skin, as if the bruise was already blooming beneath the fabric of my scrubs. The house beyond my door hummed with muffled voices, none of them directed toward me. No one knocked. No one asked if I was okay. They were too busy comforting Ariana, too busy whispering about her stress, her fragility, her unborn child. I sank onto the edge of the bed, pressing a hand against the tender spot under my left ribs, wincing as a sharp sting flared. As a trauma nurse, I had assessed thousands of injuries. This one was not severe, but the pain did not come from tissue damage. It came from the cold realization that my parents had not even looked at me. Not once. I pressed my palms over my face, trying to steady the trembling in my breath. My room smelled faintly of detergent and lavender, a scent that usually grounded me, but tonight it felt foreign. Everything felt foreign. The voices in the hallway grew softer, replaced by the creak of footsteps as someone moved into the guest room, probably getting it ready for Ariana. Meanwhile, I was here curled over on my own bed, feeling like an intruder in a house I had partially grown up in, a house that no longer felt like mine. My mind replayed the moment Jason shoved me. Not the force, but the expression on his face. A flash of something unhinged, defensive, angry in a way I had not seen in years. When we were teenagers, Jason had bursts of temper. My parents always chalked it up to stress or hormones or something someone else had done to provoke him. When he shoved a neighborhood girl into a fence because she teased him, Mom had rushed to the girl's mother with baked goods, insisting it was just a misunderstanding. When he slammed a door so hard it cracked the frame after Dad grounded him for bad grades, Mom said, "He is under so much pressure. We should not punish him for having emotions." I remembered the day he broke my laptop when I was 14. I had saved for months working shifts at the ice cream shop to buy it. Jason had stormed into my room looking for his charger, tripped over my backpack, and knocked the computer to the floor. The screen shattered. I cried. He yelled. Mom came running, and the first thing she said was not, "Jason, apologize." It was, "Maddie, why did you leave your bag where someone could trip?" It had always been like that. Jason erupted. "I absorbed." Jason lashed out. I calmed down. Jason was the problem child. I was the child who did not need attention. Sitting in my room now, pressing my hand against my bruised ribs, I could feel that old narrative curling around me like smoke filling a room with no windows. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from a coworker asking if I got home safely after my shift. I stared at the screen, unable to form a reply. Another wave of humiliation washed over me, hot and blinding. I was 26 years old, a trauma nurse who stitched up gunshot wounds and calmed distraught families and handled emergencies with a steady hand. And yet one shove from my brother had reduced me to a shaking mess. Why had I not said anything? Why had I not defended myself? Why had I let them twist it so easily? My thoughts spiraled, looping between shame and confusion, each turn sharper than the last. The bruise on my ribs pulsed in time with my heartbeat. My eyes burned, but I refused to let tears fall. Crying felt like losing. Losing to the narrative my family had always written for me. Losing to the role they assigned me from childhood. Losing to Jason. Outside, the house fell quiet. A door closed. Cabinets clicked shut. Footsteps thudded down the hallway, but none stopped at my door. No knock, no question. Oh, no concern. Not even the faintest suggestion that someone remembered I existed. I pulled my knees to my chest and rested my forehead against them, breath shaking. Silence pressed in from all sides. Heavy, suffocating, absolute. I hated how familiar it felt. The silence had always been there, even when the house was full of noise. The silence of being the child who solved her own problems. The silence of being the one who did not cause trouble. The silence of being overlooked, forgotten, expected to bend, but never break. I swallowed hard and forced myself to breathe slowly, counting each inhale and exhale the way I coached my patients through panic attacks. But the more I tried to calm myself, the more my mind replayed the scene again. Jason pacing, Ariana crying, my parents rushing to her, hovering over her like she was porcelain, and me on the floor, forgotten. I could still hear my mother's voice as if she were standing right beside me. Do not make a scene. I closed my eyes. That sentence cut deeper than Jason's shove. It told me everything I needed to know. In this house, my pain was an inconvenience. My injury was a disruption. My presence was a threat to the fragile narrative they had already decided to protect. I let out a slow breath, feeling it shudder through me. Maybe I had been naive to think staying here would be temporary but safe. Maybe I had been stupid to believe things would be different now that we were adults. Maybe I had been wrong all these years, thinking if I just stayed calm and responsible, they would eventually see me. They never had. And tonight, lying on the kitchen floor while everyone rushed past me to comfort someone else, I finally saw them. All of them. Who they were. Who they had always been. Quietly, painfully, the truth settled in. They were never going to choose me. Morning light seeped through the thin curtains long before I was ready to face it, pooling across the floorboards and creeping toward my bed like it had a mission to drag me out of the night I wished I could erase. I lay still for a moment, ribs aching in a dull, stubborn throb, my mind drifting through fragments of childhood like a slideshow someone else controlled. Jason laughing as he got away with something. Jason shouting while I stayed quiet. Jason breaking, pushing, taking, and never facing a consequence that lasted longer than an afternoon. Maybe that was why last night cut so deeply. Not because it was new, but because it proved nothing had changed. I sat up slowly, wincing at the sharp stab under my left rib and stared at the familiar walls of my childhood room. Posters, I never took down a bookshelf full of nursing textbooks, and a photo of me at my nursing school graduation that my parents never bothered to frame, propped crooked against a lamp. Next to it was a picture of Jason at 17 holding a trophy from a wrestling meet he technically lost but was awarded for best effort. Mom loved that photo. She used to tell everyone he could have gone far if life had just been easier for him. It struck me how different our stories had always been told. For Jason, every failure had a soft landing. For me, every achievement went unnoticed. I pulled on a hoodie and stepped into the hallway. Voices drifted upward from the kitchen, soft and warm, the kind of morning murmur reserved for people being comforted. I moved quietly down the stairs, feeling oddly like an intruder in my own home. At the bottom step, I paused. My mother was standing at the stove making eggs the way she only did for guests, fluffy and slow over low heat. My father sat across from Ariana, who was sipping tea with both hands curled around the mug. Her puffy eyes and trembling breath suggested she had cried long after I shut myself in my room. Jason leaned against the counter, arms crossed, but his expression was smug rather than contrite. None of them looked at me. Not even when I stepped into the room. "Good morning," I said finally, forcing steadiness into my voice, though it scraped like gravel in my throat. Jason rolled his eyes. "Morning," he muttered as if I had interrupted something. Ariana glanced up at me with nervous eyes before lowering them quickly like she feared choosing the wrong side. My mother hummed softly, stirring the eggs, pretending she had not heard me. My father did the same. The sting of it pulsed through me, familiar but sharper after last night. I poured myself coffee, the ache under my ribs flaring as I reached for the mug. I tried to stay small, quiet, contained, hoping to slip through the morning without igniting another storm. But silence in this family never stayed quiet for long. I heard Jason mutter something under his breath. I ignored it. That was my first mistake of the morning. He clicked his tongue. "Dad, tell her." My father looked at him, then at me, then sighed heavily. "Maddie, maybe you should be more aware of how your energy affects the household." I turned to him slowly. "My energy," I repeated, numb. Mom finally glanced at me, expression tight with forced patience. "Sweetheart Ariana is in a very delicate state. Stress is dangerous for her and the baby. You could have handled things differently last night." "Differently?" I stared at her. "I came home." I walked through the door. Jason stepped forward, voice rising with practiced righteous indignation. "You came in all tense and judgmental, acting like you were better than everyone. You freaked Ariana out. You know she is sensitive." "Sensitive," I whispered. My hands curled around my mug knuckles white. I watched Ariana stare down at her tea gilt flickering across her face, but she did not defend me. Maybe she could not. Maybe she had already learned that in this house truth did not matter as much as narrative. Jason's narrative. The golden sun. He had always known how to manipulate a moment, how to bend it until the truth snapped in two, and my parents clung to whichever half made him look better. When we were children, he would shove me during a game and then cry before I did, convincing Mom I hurt him first. When we were teens, he failed a class after skipping every assignment yet. Dad lectured me for not being supportive enough. When he stole money from Mom's purse to buy video games, she asked me gently if I might have misplaced it during grocery shopping. Every time, Jason walked away untouched. Every time, I learned to swallow the quiet truth. Now, watching my parents fuss over Ariana while ignoring the bruise forming under my clothes, I saw the same pattern continuing, unstoppable and unquestioned. "Maddie, Mom," said, her voice dipping into that tone that made every disagreement my fault. Maybe if you had approached things with a softer attitude, Jason would not have reacted. "A softer attitude," I repeated, feeling the heat rise beneath my skin. Dad added, "You know your brother struggles with confrontation. You should not provoke him." I let out a short laugh. "Provoked." He shoved me. I was on the floor. Jason stepped toward me, jaw-clenched eyes warning me not to push further. "Do not exaggerate. You always blow things out of proportion." I felt something shift inside me, then slow and heavy like a tectonic plate moving after years of pressure. All my childhood memories, all the ignored moments, all the swallowed hurt pressed together into one undeniable truth. Jason had always been the golden son, the one who needed protection, the one whose mistakes were merely misunderstood attempts, the one who never grew up because the family never made him. And I had always been the quiet one, the responsible one, the fixer, the forgiver, the one they believed could absorb the impact of his choices because I would not shatter. Except last night proved I was not unbreakable. I never had been. I set my mug down carefully, afraid it might slip from my fingers if I held it any longer. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something, anything, but no words came. Because what was left to say? That my parents had failed me, that Jason had hurt me, that Ariana was not the fragile saint they wanted her to be, that this house felt less like home and more like a shrine to Jason's comfort and excuses. None of it would matter. Not here. Not to them. They had chosen their truth, and I was not in it. I retreated to the far end of the living room, nursing my coffee like it was a shield, while my parents continued to orbit around Ariana as if she were royalty who had descended upon our modest home by accident. Watching them, I felt a strange detachment settle over me, as though I were observing a scene from someone else's life. Every shared glance, every hushed word of reassurance, every exaggerated gesture of care seemed designed to send one message: protect her at all costs. I tried to understand it. I tried to unravel the logic behind their sudden allegiance to a girl they had known for less than a day, while their own daughter stood bruised and ignored in plain sight. But logic had never ruled this household. Narratives did. And Ariana fit perfectly into the one my parents were desperate to believe. My mother smoothed Ariana's hair as if she had been doing it for years. "You poor thing," she murmured gently. "I cannot imagine the heartbreak of being turned away by your own family." My father nodded solemnly. "Some parents forget their responsibilities. You deserve stability, not chaos." I nearly choked on my coffee. Stability? Coming from them? Jason paced behind Ariana, running a hand through his hair, clearly riding the high of being perceived as the savior instead of the storm. He stopped only to glare at me, daring me to say something that might disrupt the illusion he had crafted. It struck me that he did not love Ariana in the way a partner should. He loved what she offered him. A ready-made storyline, a shield he could hide behind, a built-in excuse for every outburst. And my parents were eager to play their parts. Maddie Mom said suddenly, pulling me back into the room. "We need the guest room for Ariana. She needs somewhere comfortable. Jason needs to be close to her in case she feels sick or has a scare. So your room is down the hall." The hesitation in her voice hinted that she had rehearsed this, convincing herself it was reasonable. I blinked slowly. "You are moving me for someone you met last night." She stiffened. "Do not be dramatic. Ariana is carrying our grandchild." The words hit with more force than Jason's shove. Our grandchild, spoken with pride, spoken with investment, spoken like she had been waiting her whole life to say it. I pressed a hand to my ribcage, feeling the bruise pulse. Ariana shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me with guilt flickering through her expression. She seemed overwhelmed, tiny beneath the oversized sweatshirt, dark circles beneath her eyes. She did not look like someone who wanted a throne built for her. She looked like someone clinging to the first place that had not slammed the door in her face. Jason placed a hand on her shoulder possessively. "She deserves a safe place to stay. For the baby." I forced myself to breathe steadily. I had spent years in trauma work learning how to control my reactions to stay calm, even when someone was bleeding out or screaming or both. But nothing prepared me for the emotional violence of being erased in my own home. I lowered my voice. "What exactly happened at her parents' house?" Jason's jaw tightened. "They are old-fashioned. They freaked out when they found out." Ariana looked at me, then really looked, and for the first time since I had seen her, she spoke directly to me. "My parents are strict Catholics," she whispered. "When they found out I was pregnant without being married, they said I brought shame into their home." Her eyes filled with tears. "They told me to pack a bag and get out." I studied her face, the tremble in her lips, the genuine fear swimming in her eyes. Her pain was real, and that complicated everything. Ariana was not the enemy. She was vulnerable, frightened, and desperate for safety. Anyone would cling to the first family that opened its doors. I could empathize with her. What I could not accept was the way my parents used her pain as justification to ignore mine. My father placed a gentle hand on Ariana's arm. "You are safe here. We will not let anyone hurt you." I exhaled sharply, a humorless sound scraping through my throat. The irony nearly suffocated me. They promised protection to a girl they had known overnight, but had never extended that same promise to me, not even when Jason's temper had bruised more than just my ribs. I remembered being 16, crying in the garage with a split lip because Jason had slammed the car door while I stood too close. Dad found me inside, saying, "You need to stop antagonizing him, Maddie. You know how he gets." The memory flickered across my mind like a match flame. I looked at Ariana again. She was tiny, fragile, caught in the gravitational pull of my family dynamics without understanding the years of damage layered beneath the surface. Still, her presence triggered something dangerous in my parents. Hope. The hope of a grandchild. The hope of correcting mistakes they believed they made with Jason. The hope of rewriting their legacy through the unborn child of a girl they barely knew. Mom crouched in front of Ariana, voice trembling with excitement. "When is your due date, June?" Ariana whispered. My mother clasped her hands together. "Oh, sweetheart, that is wonderful. We have so much time to get everything ready." She turned to Jason, her face glowing. "We are going to help you two get back on your feet." Dad nodded enthusiastically. "A baby needs a supportive environment, stability, love, a fresh start." Something inside me cracked at those words. Throughout my entire life, my parents had preached stability but never lived it. They had tolerated Jason's chaos, minimized his violence, and left me to manage the fallout alone. But now, suddenly, they understood the importance of structure, responsibility, accountability, just not for me, only for the image of their soon-to-be expanding family. And Ariana quickly became the centerpiece of that imagined future. My mother offered her food every 10 minutes. My father insisted she stay off her feet. Jason basked in the glow of false redemption, playing the part of protective father to be with perfect execution. I watched the scene unfold and realized something dark and undeniable. Ariana was not just being cared for. She was being elevated, idealized, and in their eyes my place in this home shrank further with every passing minute. In that moment, I understood why Ariana had become their priority. She represented everything they wanted to believe about themselves. Compassionate parents, supportive grandparents, a family worth admiring, and I represented everything they wanted to forget. The silent child who had absorbed their failures, the witness to their excuses, the reminder that their golden sun was not made of gold at all. I stood there, invisible, bruised, breathing through the ache in my rib and the heavier ache in my chest, while the family gathered around the new queen of the house, never noticing they had pushed their own daughter further into the shadows. By late afternoon, the house felt tighter than the hallways of the trauma unit during a mass casualty night. Every breath thick with tension I could not name, but could feel pressing down on me from all sides. I tried to stay out of everyone's way, spending most of the day in my room, icing the bruise beneath my ribs, replaying everything in my mind until the lines between memory and interpretation blurred. Maybe I had misread something. Maybe Jason had not meant to shove me that hard. Maybe the panic in Ariana's eyes had simply made everything feel worse. These thoughts looped through my mind in a cruel rhythm, the familiar cycle of self-blame settling back onto my shoulders like an old coat I had worn too many times. But clarity kept circling back to the moment on the kitchen floor. The pain was real. The shove was real. The silence afterward was real. As the sun began to dip, casting amber light across my bedroom carpet, I knew I could not hide forever. Avoiding the situation would only tighten the knot in my chest. I needed to talk to Jason, needed to understand the version of the story he had apparently told my parents, needed to hear him admit what happened, tell the truth for once. I breathed in stiffly and made my way downstairs. Jason was in the garage, tinkering with tools he never actually used, pretending to be busy in that theatrical way he did whenever he felt cornered. The moment he saw me, he tensed as if I were a threat. "We need to talk," I said quietly. He did not look up. "I do not have time for a lecture, Maddie." I stepped closer, arms folded across my chest. "I am not lecturing. I am asking. Why did you shove me?" Jason slammed a wrench onto the workbench. "Can you stop making things so dramatic?" I stared at him. "Dramatic. You shoved me into a cabinet. You saw me hit the floor. You did that." His jaw flexed and something flickered across his expression. Not guilt, not remorse, but calculation. "Ariana was upset," he said, picking up the wrench again. "She got overwhelmed. You walked in all cold and aggressive like you always do. She thought you were judging her." I blinked, stunned by the absurdity of it. I had walked in. That was all. "Jason, I did not say a single word before you went off." His voice sharpened. "You grabbed my arm first. That is why I reacted." The air thinned instantly. A cold chill slid down my spine. "I did not touch you. You know I did not touch you." He shrugged, staring past me as though the conversation bored him. "That is not how it felt. You grabbed my arm." I pulled back. "You fell. Everyone saw how tense you were." My pulse drummed in my ears. This was not confusion. This was rewriting. I stepped closer. "Jason, look at me. You shoved me. You know you did. Just say it." His eyes flicked up at me, then hard, defiant, and disturbingly calm. "I am not lying, Maddie. You grabbed me. I pushed your hand away. That is all. My nails dug into my palms as a slow, icy anger seeped into my bones. This was not the first time he had rewritten a moment, flipped a narrative-bent reality. It was just the first time it had happened as an adult, when there were bruises blooming beneath my skin to prove the truth. A quiet voice came from the doorway. "Jason is right." I turned. Ariana stood there clutching her stomach as though she feared it might crack if she released the pressure. Her voice trembled. "I saw you grab his arm." Everything inside me stilled. She stood there with wide eyes, guilt flickering beneath her lashes, but her words were steady enough to cut. "You reached toward him and he reacted because you startled him." My mouth fell open. "Ariana, that is not what happened." She looked down quickly, her voice softening. "Maybe I misunderstood. I was scared. Everything happened fast. But Jason did not mean to hurt you. He was trying to calm things down." "Calm things down," I repeated, barely able to breathe. I was the one shoved. I was the one who hit the floor. I was the one with the bruise. How could she not see the truth? How could she side with him so easily? Jason stepped forward, placing his hand on her back like a director guiding an actor through a scene. "She is pregnant, Maddie. Everything feels intense to her. She would not say something she did not believe. So now she was the arbiter of truth, the newcomer, the girl who had known our family for 16 hours. My voice came out raw. "So you are saying I imagined it?" Jason lifted his chin. "I am saying you exaggerated it. You always do." A sharp laugh escaped me. I could not stop it. "You are unbelievable. You hurt me. And now you are twisting it to make me the problem." He scoffed. "This is exactly what I am talking about. You always make everything about you. You are impossible to talk to." I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching a scene that was both painfully familiar and horrifyingly surreal. Every instinct in me screamed that this was wrong, that I should fight harder, that I should yell, demand the truth, demand acknowledgement. But I also knew it would not matter. Jason had already spun his version. Ariana had echoed it, whether out of fear, confusion, loyalty, or because she had already learned who was safest to believe. And my parents? I turned as my mother appeared behind Ariana, her expression stern, her arms crossed as though she had been listening long enough to choose a side. "Maddie," she said, her voice clipped with disappointment. "I do not appreciate you upsetting Ariana again. You know she needs calm." I stared at her, feeling something tear inside me. "Mom," he shoved me. "I have a bruise. Should we look at it?" Dad appeared beside her eyes, weary voice soft but firm. "Sweetheart, we talked about this morning. Your reactions can escalate things. We just need peace right now." I opened my mouth to argue, but my father shook his head, the conversation already closed. My mother rubbed Ariana's back, cooing soft reassurances. Jason folded his arms triumphantly, the victor in a battle I had not even been allowed to fight. And I stood there, bruised and blamed, feeling the familiar fog of gaslighting wrap around me, smothering and thick. Somehow, I was the aggressor. Somehow, I was the problem. Somehow, I was the one who needed to calm down. And deep inside, a quiet realization settled like sediment at the bottom of a glass. They were not confused. They had chosen a story, and I was not the protagonist in it. By the time my shift started the next morning, my body felt like it had been carved out of exhaustion and bruises, but I forced myself into the hospital anyway because work was the only place where reality held firm. In the trauma wing, cause and effect still existed. Pain had reasons. Wounds had origins. People believed you when you said this hurts. I walked through the automatic doors, the blast of antiseptic and cold air washing over me like relief drenched in fluorescent light. My coworkers greeted me with casual familiarity, unaware of the bruise hidden beneath my scrubs, or the knot that had lodged itself beneath my sternum since last night. I grabbed my clipboard and stepped into the rhythm I knew by heart. Assess, treat, soothe, stabilize, document. The routine steadied me, coaxing my mind into tighter focus. For a few blessed hours, the chaos inside me quieted as I poured myself into my work, the predictable hum of beeping monitors and rolling stretchers drowning out everything else. Then, just after noon, a paramedic rushed in with a woman clutching her side, her breath coming in short bursts. 20s, pale, disheveled, scared. Her hands trembled as she held onto the edges of the gurney. When the paramedic said domestic incident, my pulse stuttered. She had been pushed, he explained in clipped tones. Not down the stairs, thank God, but hard enough that she hit the edge of a counter. I blinked, the words slicing too close to home. I guided her into an exam room, my hands steady even as my chest tightened. She winced when I asked her to lift her shirt, revealing a fresh bruise blooming across her ribs, angry and purple. I sucked in a breath. All at once, last night's pain flared beneath my own skin, phantom heat crawling across the memory of where I hit the cabinet. She watched my reaction carefully. "You get patients like me a lot." She tried to laugh, but it cracked halfway. I nodded. "More than people know." She swallowed, eyes glistening. "He said it was my fault, that I startled him, that I should not have raised my voice." My stomach twisted. The same script, the same excuses, the same twisting of truth until the victim carried both the bruise and the blame. I lowered my voice. "None of this is your fault. Not the bruise. Not the shove. Not the story he is telling." Her breath hitched and she nodded hard as if clinging to my words like a rope tossed into deep water. She whispered, "My boyfriend's family said I provoked him. They said men snap sometimes and women should be more careful." I froze. Her voice cracked. What killed me wasn't his hands. It was hearing people say I caused it. Something inside me cracked open, slow and wrenching. Not his hands. Their words. Their loyalty to the abuser. Their insistence that peace mattered more than truth. Their blindness to the pain right in front of them. My vision blurred for a second, and I steadied myself on the edge of the exam table. The room felt smaller, as though every breath I took was pushing against the walls. I helped the woman sit back, listening to her recount the moment she hit the counter, her voice trembling with every detail. And while she spoke, I heard an echo. My own gasp when Jason shoved me. My own breath shuddering as I hit the floor. My own parents rushing not to me, but to Ariana. My mother's voice slicing through the air. "Do not make a scene. You stressed her. You know she cannot handle pressure." I swallowed hard. I finished the exam, took her vitals, documented her injuries with sterile precision, photographed the bruise the way protocol required. As I moved methodically through the steps, a quiet clarity threaded through my mind. Document everything. Believe what your eyes see. Trust the evidence. Trust your own memory. It was the opposite of everything my family ever taught me. When the attending physician arrived, we reviewed the case together, confirming that the patient did not appear to have fractured ribs, but would be sore for days. He gently recommended she speak to an advocate from the hospital's domestic violence response team. She nodded, tears streaming freely now. When she reached for my hand, I squeezed hers. "You deserve to feel safe." She met my eyes. "So do you." The words hit like a blow I never saw coming. I stepped out of the room, my breath stumbling, leaning against the hallway wall as the world tilted for a moment. Her words burrowed beneath my skin, deeper than the bruise, deeper than the anger. "So do you." Safety. Something my family had never offered me. Not with Jason's temper. Not with their excuses. Not with their selective blindness. I pressed a hand gently to my rib cage, feeling the dull ache beneath my fingers. I deserved safety. I deserved to be believed. I deserved not to be blamed for someone else's violence. The realization settled over me with startling weight, like someone lifting a veil I did not know had been draped over my vision my entire life. My family had never protected me from Jason. They had protected Jason from accountability. They had coddled him, excused him, rewritten his wrongs until he believed them too. And now that pattern had extended to Ariana, who clung to their fabricated story because it provided shelter she desperately needed. But I saw the truth now. The truth I could no longer swallow. The truth that last night's shove was part of a larger pattern, one I had endured for years, one I had normalized out of survival. A pattern that would never change unless I changed something. I pushed away from the wall and exhaled slowly, the breath trembling but determined. For the first time in a long time, I felt something sharper than pain, steadier than anger, more powerful than fear. Clarity. I deserved to be safe. And if my family would not help me find safety, then I would create it myself. When I got home after my shift, the house was dim except for the soft glow of the living room lamp casting a golden halo over Ariana curled on the couch with a blanket tucked around her legs. Jason hovered nearby, scrolling through his phone like a restless guard dog. My parents whispered in the kitchen, their voices low and careful, the way people speak when they are protecting a fragile narrative. No one looked up when I entered, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. It should have hurt. It did hurt. But something inside me had shifted. Instead of sinking under the weight of their indifference, I felt myself rising above it, observing it with a strange sense of distance. The woman in the hospital room earlier replayed in my mind. Her trembling voice, her bruised ribs, her confession about the pain of being blamed, her words pressing into me like a fingerprint. You deserve to feel safe. I carried that sentence with me as I walked past my family and climbed the stairs to my room, shutting the door behind me with a soft click. I leaned against it for a moment, exhaling deeply, letting the silence settle. Then I switched on my bedside lamp and took a slow, steady breath. It was time to stop hoping they would see the truth on their own. It was time to protect myself in the only way I could trust. I pulled my phone from my pocket, rolled up the hem of my scrub top, and pointed the camera toward the spreading bruise across my left ribs. The discoloration had deepened into shades of purple and red, the edges tinged with sickly green. The phone clicked. Then again. And again. Different angles, different distances, different lighting. Clinical. Documented. I opened a notes app and typed the time date and a short description of what happened. Shoved by Jason Clark into lower kitchen cabinet. Fell on left side. Pain consistent with contusion. No shortness of breath. No obvious fracture. Documenting. The words looked cold on the screen, but clarity was cold. Necessary. Rational. I saved the note and scrolled through my call history, screenshotting everything from the night before. The missed calls while I sat on the floor. The texts from coworkers that showed I had been on shift until moments before I arrived home. I emailed myself copies of the injury photos and labeled them by date. Folder name, safety documentation. It felt surreal to be compiling evidence against my own brother and against the narrative my parents clung to, but each screenshot made my breathing steadier. Each saved file felt like a step out of the fog they had been pulling me into. I dug through my laundry basket, found the scrubs I wore the night before, and examined the left side under the fluorescent desk lamp. A faint smudge lingered where I had hit the cabinet. I folded the scrubs carefully and placed them into a plastic bag with the date written across the front in black marker. Not because I planned on going to the police tonight. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally understood how people protected themselves when their own families refused to. Documenting the truth was not betrayal. It was survival. Next, I opened the voice memo app and recorded a soft, steady narration of what had happened, speaking the facts the way I would present a case report. On Thursday evening at approximately 8:30, my brother Jason Clark shoved me in the kitchen. I fell onto the lower cabinet and sustained a bruised rib. Witnesses present were Jason Clark, my mother, Diane Clark, my father, Mark Clark, and Jason's girlfriend, Ariana Lewis. Immediately after, my family blamed me for upsetting an emotionally distressed pregnant woman. At no point did anyone check my condition. This is a record for personal safety. The clinical tone steadied me. It created distance between the hurt and the evidence. I saved the file and backed it up to my private cloud storage. Then I turned to something I had avoided for years. I opened an empty document on my laptop and typed the heading, History of Incidents. My fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly as memories poured forward like water bursting through a cracked dam. I began typing. Broken laptop at age 14 blamed on me. Pushed during an argument at age 16. Split lip in garage. Mom said stop antagonizing him. Door slammed near me at 17. Bruise on shoulder. Dad said boys get frustrated. Shouting in hallway when I was 19. He shoved me aside to get through the doorway. Mom said he did not mean it. 22 years old. Thanksgiving. Jason drunk. Threw a plate. Shards hit my arm. They told me not to overreact. 26, last night, kitchen floor. I listed each one separately with the year the injury, if there was one, and my family's reaction. Seeing it all laid out in black and white made my breath catch. It was a pattern, not scattered incidents, a pattern of unchecked aggression, a pattern of excuses, a pattern of me absorbing the blame. I pressed a hand to my sternum as my heartbeat accelerated, a low tremor passing through me. This was the first time I had ever allowed myself to name it, to catalog it, to refuse to bury it. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message from my mother. Do not bring tension into the house. Ariana cannot handle more stress. I stared at the screen. Then I took a screenshot and added it to the folder. A minute later, another text arrived. Jason said you grabbed him first. Please do not twist the story. Screenshot. Added. My hands were steady now, colder and calmer than they had been in months, maybe in years. I scrolled through earlier messages from my father asking me to be more supportive, older messages from holidays where I apologized even though I had done nothing wrong. I screenshot them all. They were pieces of a larger picture, one that was finally coming into focus. When I finished, I sat back in my chair and breathed in slowly, amazed by how different the room felt, not safer. Not yet, but clearer. The fog that had followed me since childhood was thinning. The same instinct that steadied my hands in the trauma bay was guiding me now. Evidence mattered. Facts mattered. And for the first time in my life, I was not letting someone rewrite what happened to me. I closed the laptop, gently pressed my palm against the cool metal, and whispered the truth out loud for the first time. I believe myself. And that was the beginning of everything that came next. The next 48 hours rolled over me in slow motion, each hour stretched thin with tension, the house vibrating with unspoken hostility that clung to the air like humidity before a storm. I kept to myself, moving through the hallways, quietly slipping in and out of rooms like a ghost, trying not to disturb the living. My ribs still ached when I breathed too deeply, but I did not mention it. I knew better by now. Mentioning pain only invited blame. On the second night, something shifted. Jason's temper had been simmering all day, agitation radiating from him like heat from asphalt in July. Ariana cried twice that afternoon over tiny things the way pregnant women sometimes did, but Jason blamed each outburst on me, even though I had barely been downstairs. Every sound I made, every movement was interpreted as a provocation. My parents absorbed his accusations without question, shaking their heads at me in quiet disappointment as if my very existence was disruptive. By evening, the pressure in the house felt unbearable. I was in my room trying to read through every paragraph slid off my brain like water off glass. The bruise across my ribcage throbbed with a familiar heat, but I breathed around it the way I had coached trauma patients to breathe through shock. Slow inhale, slow exhale. Then the footsteps started. Heavy, fast, purposeful, coming straight toward my room. I sat up in bed, pulse spiking every nerve beneath my skin, waking at once. The doorknob rattled violently. Maddie, open the door! Jason's voice exploded through the wood loud enough that my heart lurched against my ribs. I stood slowly, not wanting to make any sudden movement that might set him off more. What do you want? I called back, trying to steady my voice. He slammed his hand against the door, the sound echoing down the hallway. You told Ariana she should not be living here. Why would you say that? The accusation sliced through the air. I had not spoken to Ariana since this morning, but that did not matter. Logic never mattered when Jason was spiraling. Jason, I did not talk to her today. He pounded again harder this time, the door vibrating under the force. Do not lie to me. She said you made her feel unwelcome. You are stressing her out on purpose. I backed away from the door instinctively. My breath came shallow and sharp. Jason's temper was unpredictable on a good day, and this was not a good day. Mom's voice floated weakly from down the hall. Jason, calm down. But she did not come closer. No one ever came closer. He kept hitting the door each strike, sending tremors through the hinges, through my pulse, through the bruise beneath my ribs. Something inside me cracked open a small but undeniable thread of fear weaving through my chest. This was different. He was not pacing or ranting. He was escalating. I swallowed, hands shaking uncontrollably. "Jason, stop. You are scaring me." He laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. "You always make yourself the victim. Open the door. Now." The next hit was so violent the frame groaned. I backed into the corner, grabbing my phone off the nightstand without thinking. My fingers moved on instinct. I dialed 3 numbers, the ones I had coached countless patients to dial but had never even considered for myself. 911. "What is your emergency?" The dispatcher's calm voice filled my ear like a lifeline. My own voice trembled. "My brother is trying to break down my door. He shoved me 2 nights ago. I am scared he is going to hurt me again." The dispatcher spoke gently but firmly. "Are you in immediate danger?" I flinched as Jason slammed the door again. "Yes, stay on the line with me. Officers are on their way." I sank onto the floor in the corner of my room, curling one hand over my ribs as if shielding the bruise from fresh injury. Outside, Jason kept hitting the door, shouting accusations, twisting reality like a reflex he had perfected. "You are ruining this family. You are making everything worse. You are jealous. You are unstable." My mother's panicked whispering drifted through the hallway, her voice pleading with him while never once checking if I was all right. He pounded the door again, the strike loud enough to rattle the glass of my picture frames. The dispatcher asked if I had any weapons. "No," I whispered. "Just me. Just fear." And then the sound changed. A hard series of knocks shook the front door downstairs, followed by a commanding voice. "Police! Open the door!" Everything went silent. Jason froze. My parents' scrambled voices sharp and frantic. Ariana cried a soft, panicked sound. I stayed curled in the corner, phone pressed to my ear, as the dispatcher told me to remain where I was until officers made contact. For the first time in my life, I obeyed without question. 2 sets of heavy footsteps climbed the stairs. A firm knock sounded on my door, but this time it carried authority instead of rage. "Miss Clark." The voice was steady, controlled. It sent a rush of air through my lungs I had not realized I was holding. I stood, legs trembling, and unlocked the door. 2 officers stood there, one older, one younger, both assessing me in a single sweep the way I assessed patients the moment they entered the ER. The older officer glanced at the side of my shirt, where the bruise darkened the fabric faintly. "Are you hurt?" I nodded numbly. He asked if he could see the injury. I lifted my shirt just enough for him to examine the bruise. His jaw tightened. He asked what happened. I told him the truth. Not the rewritten version, not the softened version. The truth. Jason shoved me. I hit the cabinet. And tonight, he tried to break down my door. The younger officer scribbled notes. The older one walked down the hall and spoke to Jason separately. I could not hear what Jason said, but I could imagine it. Disbelief, denial, anger, deflection. I heard the rising edge of his voice through the thin walls. "I did not touch her tonight. I did not shove her. She is lying. She is always lying." I felt my stomach twist with a familiar dread, but this time something was different. The officer did not believe him blindly. He asked questions. He requested identification. He separated everyone. He controlled the scene. When he came back to me, his voice remained steady. "Miss Clark, because the incident did not happen in our presence, we cannot make an arrest tonight. But we have documented everything. This report will be important if you choose to pursue further action. You have options. You can go to the courthouse tomorrow for a temporary protection order if you feel unsafe." The knot in my chest loosened just slightly. Not safety. Not yet. But possibility. The officer handed me a card with case information, his tone firm but respectful. "You did the right thing calling us. If you feel threatened again, call immediately. We will come back." After they left, the house fell into a suffocating silence. Jason glared at me with a fury that promised retaliation. My parents looked at me like I had committed some irreversible betrayal. Ariana wept quietly into her blanket, shaken by the officer's presence. No one asked if I was okay. No one apologized. No one acknowledged the bruise or the fear or the danger. But for the first time, their silence did not swallow me. I had spoken the truth, and someone outside this house had listened. The morning after the police came, the house felt different. Not quieter, not calmer, just exposed. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for someone to break the fragile veneer that had held my family together for decades. I woke before sunrise, the bruise on my ribs stiff with that deep, lingering ache that always appeared the third day after impact. I sat on the edge of my bed, fingers tracing the edge of the discoloration beneath my shirt, and for the first time I did not minimize the pain. I acknowledged it. I named it. Injury, caused by Jason, ignored by my parents, documented. When I stepped into the hallway, Jason's door was cracked open. He was awake, pacing, muttering under his breath. Ariana was nowhere in sight. My mother stood in the kitchen clutching her coffee mug like it might keep her upright. My father kept rubbing the bridge of his nose in slow circles as if pressure might erase the police report filed under our family name. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was brittle. "Maddie, why did you have to call them?" Her words landed like a punch, but the impact did not flatten me this time. I inhaled slowly. Because he tried to break my door, and because he shoved me 2 nights ago. She flinched like the words were indecent. We handled things privately before. This was unnecessary. I stared at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "No." It was overdue. Her jaw tightened, but before she could respond, Jason stormed into the room, eyes bloodshot with a cocktail of rage and humiliation. "You made me look like a criminal." He spit the words at me like venom. I held his gaze. "You did that. Not me." He barked a bitter laugh. "The cops said there was no evidence. They did not arrest me because you made the whole thing up." A sharp, cold clarity settled over me. "No, Jason. They did not arrest you because they did not witness it. That is not the same thing." His face contorted fury, twisting his features into something unrecognizable. Mom jumped between us, holding up her hands as if I was the threat. "Enough, both of you. Jason is under a lot of stress. Ariana is anxious. The baby, the golden center of the new family constellation. Everything orbited around protecting the unborn child, even if the cost was reality itself. I was done bending my spine to fit their narrative. I turned away from them and walked into the living room, needing space to breathe. But instead, I found something else. A stack of old papers on the coffee table. Legal papers, court documents. The top page caught my eye. A case number. Year 6 years ago. The county seal. The name, Jason Clark. My stomach dropped. Before I even touched the page, I knew what it was. But picking it up still felt like lifting the lid on a coffin I did not know existed in our family. Charge assault. Victim redacted. Disposition sealed by court order. Attorney of record, Thomas Weller. My father's old college friend. I stared at the paper pulse pounding like a drumbeat in my throat. I flipped through the next few pages. Injury photos, bruises, witness statements, a plea agreement that suggested Jason had completed an anger management program, statements from my parents vouching for his character, Mom's handwriting, Dad's signature. My breath shuddered out of me. My parents had known. They had been here before. They had chosen the same path then as now. Cover, shield, excuse, protect. Not the victim. Not accountability. Not justice. Him. Only him. Behind me, I heard my father step into the room. He inhaled sharply when he saw the papers in my hand. "Maddie." He sounded like someone caught in the middle of committing a crime. "Put those away. We do not need to bring that up." A cold, trembling sensation spread down my spine. "You knew he hurt someone. You knew he was capable of this, and you still told me to calm down. You still said I overreacted." Dad pinched the bridge of his nose again, but this time his hand shook. "We handled it. It was sealed. It's in the past. It is not who he is." I looked him dead in the eyes. "It is exactly who he is. And you have spent years making sure no one can prove it." Mom rushed in pale and frantic. "Maddie, please! You cannot say things like that. His record could affect custody if anything goes wrong. Custody. The word snapped into place like a puzzle clicking shut. That was why they were desperate to protect him. Not because they believed him, not because they thought he was innocent, but because they were afraid the baby's future would be jeopardized if Jason's violent history became public again. "You are using me." The words came out hoarse. "You are blaming me to protect his image so he does not lose rights to a child who is not even born yet." My mother's silence was an answer. My father's refusal to meet my eyes was another. I felt something inside me collapse and solidify at the same time. A final fracture, a final fusion. Years of confusion suddenly made sense. They were never misguided. They were never unaware. They were deliberate. Every time they told me not to provoke him, every time they defended him, every time they blamed me, they were protecting him because they believed saving his future mattered more than safeguarding my present. My brother broke things and they swept up the glass before anyone noticed. He hurt people and they scrubbed the evidence until the court records disappeared. And when he hurt me, they treated it like an inconvenience in the story they were trying to preserve. Somewhere deep in my body, beneath the layers of fear and conditioning and forced silence, something finally locked into place. "Enough." Jason stepped toward me, fury written across every line of his face. "You love playing the victim, do you?" He moved too fast, instinctively, predictably. My father grabbed his arm, not out of concern for me, but out of fear of witnesses. "Stop. Not here. Not again. Again." The word sliced through the air like a confession. Jason froze. For the first time, his eyes flickered with something like panic, not concern, reputation. Down the hall, Ariana appeared at the top of the stairs, her hands wrapped protectively around her stomach. Her eyes were wide and glassy, darting between us. "What is happening?" But no one answered her, because in that moment, every truth my family had tried to bury was sitting on the coffee table in plain sight, and I was done pretending not to see it. I held up the legal documents, my voice steady for the first time in days. "I am not your shield. I am not your silence. I am not your scapegoat." The room pulsed with stunned, horrified silence. My mother whispered my name like a plea. Maddie. But I had already stepped off the old path. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the sealed court documents scattered across the coffee table, the look in my father's eyes when he said again, the way my mother hovered protectively around Jason, like he was the one who needed saving. The truth had detonated inside that living room like a silent explosion, but instead of clearing space, it left jagged rubble between us. By morning, the air in the house felt scorched with resentment. No one spoke to me, but their silence was not empty. It was loaded, accusatory, waiting for me to fold back into the old role, the one where I swallowed the truth so Jason could keep his future intact. I moved through the house like someone passing through a war zone where landmines had no markers. Even the floorboards creaked differently under my feet. Around noon, I came down the stairs for a glass of water. Ariana was sitting at the table, her face pale and eyes red-rimmed, her hands protectively cradling her stomach. She looked up at me as though I had personally dragged the police into her life. My parents hovered behind her, two silent sentinels guarding the narrative they wanted to restore. No one said a word. The quiet pressed against the walls until it felt suffocating. I turned toward the sink, filling my glass slowly. My ribs tugged under the movement, a dull reminder of what had brought everything to this point. I had just set the glass down when Jason walked in. His shoulders were tense, his jaw locked so tightly that a vein throbbed in his neck. He looked like someone holding back an eruption with sheer will. For a split second, our eyes met. His were full of something unhinged, something raw and dangerous. And then he snapped. He lunged forward faster than I expected, grabbing my arm hard enough that my skin pinched. I stumbled backward, hitting the counter. The glass tipped, hitting the floor with a sharp crack. Before I could react, he shoved me again, hard, right toward the staircase. My breath seized in my chest as my heel slipped on the edge of the carpeted step. The world tilted, Time stretched, each second elongating into a terrifying still frame. I threw a hand out, catching the banister at the last possible moment. My shoulder jerked painfully, my ribs screaming as the rest of my body swung forward. For one horrifying second, I felt gravity clawing at me, threatening to pull me all the way down. Then I caught myself, barely. My fingers clenched around the railing until my knuckles burned white. My chest heaved, vision blurring at the edges. But I had not fallen. Behind me, Ariana screamed, "Jason, stop!" My mother gasped, a hand flying to her mouth, but she did not move toward me. She moved toward Ariana instead. My father stood frozen, his face a mask of dread, but not for me. No, for him, for Jason, for the consequences he knew would follow if this became public. "Are you insane?" my father hissed, grabbing Jason's arm. "What were you thinking?" Jason ripped his arm away. "She provoked me. She keeps provoking me." I pushed myself upright, still gripping the railing to steady my shaking legs. "Provoked you?" I whispered, my voice trembling, but rising with something hotter than fear. Something older, stronger. "This is who you are. This is who you have always been." Jason's eyes darkened, anger crackling off him like electricity. "You ruin everything. You always have." And then Ariana, crying and shaking, shouted the line that sealed everything in place. "Look at what you are doing to us," she sobbed. "You are stressing me and the baby. It is your fault. My fault." The words hit harder than Jason's shove, harder than the bruise still blooming across my ribs, harder than the years of silence and excuses and being invisible in my own home. My mother backed Ariana toward a chair, petting her hair, cooing soft reassurances. My father paced anxiously between Jason and the door, muttering about lawyers, about officers, about how this could not happen again. Not again. Never again. But none of them checked on me. None of them asked if I was hurt, if I was okay, if I needed help after almost being thrown down a staircase. Not one pair of eyes landed on me with concern. Only annoyance. Only fear of consequences for him. Something inside me broke. Calmly. Quietly. Like a glass set down too hard on a counter. I straightened slowly, letting go of the banister, my breath still shaky, but my spine straighter than it had been in years. Enough. The word came out soft but solid. My mother finally looked at me, eyes wide with something like warning. "Maddie, do not start. Not now. This house does not need more drama." I stared at her, stunned by how truly she believed that. Drama. Not violence. Not danger. Not the pattern of abuse laid bare. Drama. I looked at each of them. My mother clinging to Ariana. My father gripping Jason's arm as if holding him together. Ariana crying like she was the only one hurting. And Jason, the boy they had protected into a man who believed he was untouchable. My voice came out steady. "I will not protect this family's lies anymore." My father stepped forward, panic tightening his features. "Maddie, think carefully. Words like that can ruin lives." "My life is already ruined," I said quietly. "You just never cared enough to notice." The room went still, silent, breathless. For once, no one knew what to say. I walked past them, my legs trembling but my resolve solid. I went to my room, grabbed my suitcase from under the bed, and began packing. Not frantically, not emotionally, methodically, like a nurse preparing for a shift. Essentials first: documents, clothes, my work shoes, my badge, my phone charger. I zipped the suitcase shut as voices filled the hallway again. Angry, pleading, confused. But none of them opened the door. None of them tried to stop me. None of them apologized. When I walked down the stairs with my suitcase in hand, Jason stood at the bottom, his arms crossed. He looked at me with contempt, running away again. "Figures." I met his gaze evenly. "No, I am walking away. There is a difference." My mother started crying. My father said my name like a warning. Ariana whispered, "Please do not do this," while clutching her stomach like my departure was a threat. But I was already out the door. The cold air hit my face. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I walked down the driveway with my suitcase rolling behind me, their voices fading into the background, swallowed by the quiet of the world outside the walls that had held me hostage for so long. Something inside me whispered the truth I had been too scared to believe until now. This is liberation, not escape. The next morning, I woke in a small motel room 20 minutes outside town, the kind with stiff sheets and a heater that hummed unevenly through the night. But the silence was clean. No footsteps pacing, no doors slamming, no voices twisting reality into knots. Just quiet. And for the first time in years, quiet did not feel like punishment. It felt like oxygen. My ribs ached when I sat up the bruise, now a deep mottled purple across my side. I lifted my phone, stared at the photos I had taken at the timeline I had written at the police report information tucked beneath the officer's card. The truth was organized, documented, clear. Now I had to do something with it. By 9:30, I was standing outside the county courthouse, clutching a folder of evidence so tightly that the corners left indentations on my palms. The courthouse was old brick tall windows catching the morning light. People moved in and out with practiced familiarity, but my legs felt shaky as I climbed the steps. I had walked into emergency rooms without blinking. I had run toward trauma while others ran away. But this was different. This was personal. This was reclaiming something my family had spent years eroding. Inside the hallways smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. A clerk at the front desk looked up with a polite, tired smile. "Can I help you?" I swallowed hard. "I need to file for a protection order." Her expression softened with a quiet understanding I had seen 1,000 times on the hospital floor. "Of course." She slid a packet of forms toward me along with a pen. "Take your time. Sit wherever you like. If you have pictures or documents, you can attach them when you are done." My throat tightened. I nodded and found a seat near a window. The forms were straightforward: name of respondent, dates of incidents, description of threats, injuries sustained, witnesses. There was no room for shame, no room for denial, only truth. I wrote slowly, carefully each word, a small reclaiming of my own reality. When I finished, I slid the photos into the packet. The timeline. The screenshot of my mother telling me not to bring tension into the house. The screenshot of Jason accusing me of provoking him. The injury assessment from my coworker signed and dated. Paper evidence of years of silence. When I returned the packet, the clerk scanned through it, nodding slightly. "The judge is in today. If you are able to wait, they may see you within the hour." My pulse fluttered. Yes. I can wait? I sat on a wooden bench, the sunlight warming the top of my head as people walked past. I held the officer's card between my fingers, rubbing the edge absent-mindedly. It felt like a lifeline. After 40 minutes, a bailiff appeared. Maddie Clark. The sound of my name made my heart leap. I stood, palms, sweaty knees unsteady, and followed him into a small courtroom. The judge sat behind a wide desk, glasses perched low on her nose as she scanned paperwork. She looked up as I approached. "Good morning. Please have a seat." Her voice was firm, but not unkind. I sat clutching my folder. "I understand you are seeking a temporary protection from abuse order." "Yes, Your Honor." She read through the documents quietly, stopping twice. Once at the photos, once at the timeline. Then she looked at me, her expression sharpening. "Miss Clark, did you take these photos the night of the incident?" "Yes." "And the injuries are consistent with what you described?" "Yes." "And the respondent attempted to force entry to your room while yelling threats?" "Yes." She nodded. "And you have lived in the same residence until recently?" "Yes." The judge folded her hands. "Your documentation is clear. You followed all appropriate steps. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting a temporary protection order effective immediately." Relief washed over me so suddenly I felt dizzy. She slid a set of papers toward me. "This will be served to Mr. Clark by the sheriff's office today. He cannot contact you, approach you, or enter your residence or workplace. A hearing for a final order will be set within 10 days. You will be notified." I stared at the papers, dazed. "Thank you, Your Honor." She softened just slightly. "You did the right thing coming here." No one deserves to feel unsafe in their own home. I nodded, unable to speak. When I walked out of the courtroom, the hallway felt brighter. Even the air tasted different, like possibility, like safety. The clerk handed me a stamped copy of the order. Before I left the building, I stepped outside to call the sheriff's office number listed on the form. A deputy answered. "This is Deputy Harris. How can I help?" I took a breath. I just wanted to confirm that the protection order for Jason Clark will be served today. "Yes, ma'am. We will issue service within the next 2 hours." My knees weakened with relief. Thank you. After I hung up, I sat on the steps of the courthouse for a long moment, staring at the morning traffic passing by. People headed to lunch, people running errands, people living ordinary lives untouched by the storms inside mine. But today, something shifted. Today, I had chosen myself. I checked my phone. 5 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, 2 angry texts from Jason. I took screenshots of all of them. Then I turned the phone off and slipped it into my bag. By early afternoon, my coworker texted me. "Sheriff just came by the house. Served Jason. Your parents looked stunned. Are you safe?" I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight slide off my shoulders like a long-worn backpack. "Yes," I typed back. "I am safe." For the first time, the words felt true. Later that evening, as I sat in the motel room with takeout and a blanket pulled around my legs, another message came through from a different coworker. Ariana left the house, went to stay with a friend. She said she cannot handle the drama. I let my head fall back against the headboard. Even now, they centered themselves in the story. But it did not matter anymore, because this part was no longer about them. It was about me. It was about reclaiming the parts of myself I had buried to keep the peace. It was about choosing safety over silence, truth over loyalty, myself over them. When the sun set, the protection order sat on the nightstand beside me, the official seal catching the faint orange light. Justice was not a single moment. It was a process, and for the first time I was in it, fully, fearfully, and completely unafraid to keep going. When I woke the next morning in the motel, the air felt strangely still, as if the world itself were holding its breath. My phone, which I had turned off the night before, sat on the nightstand like a silent witness waiting to deliver whatever chaos had come overnight. I did not power it on immediately. Instead, I made coffee from the tiny machine on the dresser, sat by the window, and watched the traffic roll past the parking lot. Ordinary people heading to ordinary mornings. No one knew the entire structure of my family had cracked open in a single weekend. When I finally turned on my phone, it buzzed non-stop, lighting up in frantic pulses. Voicemails, missed calls, texts from numbers I recognized and others I did not. The sheriff must have served the order first thing in the morning because the earliest messages began with confusion and disbelief. "Maddie, call us right now. This is your father. There must be some mistake." Then, "Did you really file something against your brother?" I deleted nothing, screenshotted everything. Within 10 minutes, the tone shifted. The moment Jason must have seen the papers, or when my parents realized the situation was not reversible through emotional manipulation alone, the messages escalated. "What have you done? You have no idea the trouble you just caused. This is going to ruin his job." I stared at the screen, letting the words skim over me without sinking in. They no longer had the power they once did. But then something I had not expected began happening. A text from my Aunt Lynn. A simple sentence. "Honey, I saw the court docket online. Are you okay?" My heart stuttered. In my county protection orders were public record unless sealed for special circumstances. Anyone who knew where to look could see filings names and case numbers. And people were looking. Another message came from a coworker at the diner where Jason worked weekends. "Your brother was sent home. Manager said they cannot have him on schedule with an active order." I sat up straighter, the weight of reality settling on my chest. A protection order does not just sit quietly in a drawer. It ripples. It becomes part of the world, and the world reacts. My phone dinged again, then again, and again. Neighbors from our block texted me. Church acquaintances messaged me. Some were shocked, but many were not. "Maddie, I am so sorry. We always worried about the way he talked to you." I grew very still. The truth had not been invisible. People had simply been silent. It was astonishing, almost heartbreaking how quickly the narrative shifted when facts were placed in broad daylight. Before noon, my cousin Angela called. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Maddie, I just wanted to say I believe you. Mom and I talked. We saw the bruises in the photos. We had no idea it was this bad." My throat tightened. "Thank you" was all I managed. Angela hesitated. "People are talking. Your parents told everyone you overreacted. But now that the report is public, people are asking questions they should have asked years ago." I almost laughed, but it came out more like an exhale. Years. Yes. That sounded right. Angela lowered her voice. "Someone told me your mom is furious. She said you have embarrassed the entire family. She has been calling every relative to get ahead of the story." I closed my eyes and leaned back against the headboard. I could picture it perfectly. My mother pacing the living room voice tight, trying to wrangle the narrative like she always had. Only this time the truth was not inside the house. It was outside, documented public, and no number of phone calls could undo that. By early afternoon, news came through a mutual friend from high school. Ariana left Jason, packed a bag, and went to stay with a coworker. "She is saying she needs things calm for the baby." The words hit me with unexpected force. Even the girl they had defended over me was beginning to see the truth when she stepped outside the pressure cooker of the house. By 3 o'clock, my mother called 6 more times. My father 4. I let them go to voicemail. I played the messages only once long enough to save them. "Maddie, this is your mother. How could you bring law enforcement into our home? You should have handled this privately. The shame you are bringing onto us is unbelievable." Then my father. "You need to retract this. Your brother is under so much stress. You know how he gets. We need to protect the baby's future." I stared at the last line for a long time. Protect the baby's future. Not protect me. Not protect anyone except the image they curated around Jason becoming a father. The realization made my chest tighten and loosen all at once, like something painful finally lifting. At 4:30, my childhood neighbor, Mrs. Haverly, texted me. "Maddie, sweetheart, I saw your name on the docket. I wish we had stepped in when we heard the shouting over the years. I am so sorry we did not." Tears pricked my eyes, softening the room around me. Not because she apologized, but because someone finally said out loud what no one in my family ever had. "You deserved better." When sunset bled across the motel curtains, another message arrived, this one from a number I did not recognize. The text was short. "The pastor at your parents' church mentioned the situation during the prayer list. He said he hopes for healing, but that accountability is necessary." My breath caught. Accountability. A word my family had never used unless it applied to me. Social consequences were doing what emotional appeals never had. They were revealing patterns, shifting loyalties, cracking the shell of denial. Around 7, Angela texted again. "Mom confronted your mother. She asked why they hid everything, why they kept defending him. Your mother broke down crying, said they were doing their best, but everyone is furious. They think they protected the wrong child." I covered my mouth with my hand and let out a trembling breath. The wrong child. Words I never thought I would hear from anyone connected to my family. As the messages continued pouring and a strange sense of calm settled over me, I was no longer fighting alone. The truth was doing its own work now, moving through phones, conversations, church halls, job sites, and kitchens across our town. By 9 o'clock, one last message appeared. Not a threat. Not anger, just exhaustion. From my mother, Maddie. "Please, we cannot handle this. Please drop the order before things get worse." I stared at the screen, my heart steady, unmoved. I typed back 4 words. "I will not." Then I powered off my phone. I sat in the quiet motel room with the protection order folded neatly beside me and felt something new, something I could not name immediately. Then, it came slowly like the subtle warmth of a sunrise you do not realize you are watching until the world brightens around you. Relief, validation, and the start of peace. The apartment I found in Pittsburgh was small, barely 600 square feet with uneven hardwood floors and a window that overlooked the alley behind a coffee shop. But when I unlocked the door for the first time, carrying nothing but a single suitcase and a box of documents tied with string, it felt like stepping onto new ground after years of sinking through the same collapsing floorboards. The air was quiet, untouched by tension. No eggshells beneath my feet. No voices shouting down hallways. No footsteps that made my pulse spike. Just silence, clean and intact. I set my suitcase down, leaned my back against the door, and let myself breathe in a way I never could at my parents' house. Deep, slow, unpressured. It surprised me that the first feeling wasn't victory. It wasn't even relief. It was exhaustion, the kind that sits in your bones after years of carrying emotional weight your body never should have had to bear. But beneath it, stitched like a faint thread, there was something else. The beginning of steadiness. I spent the first night on an air mattress with one pillow and a blanket I bought from a discount store on the way over. I fell asleep to the hum of the refrigerator and woke up to sunlight cutting in through the blinds, dust floating softly like tiny flecks of possibility. I made coffee in the cheap little maker the previous tenant left behind. It tasted burnt, but I drank every drop sitting cross-legged on the floor, cupping my hands around the warm mug like it was a promise. Over the next days, I moved slowly, choosing each piece of furniture with intention. A small second-hand table, 2 chairs, a lamp with a warm, steady glow. I didn't rush. I let the apartment shape itself around me instead of filling it to cover the emptiness I had carried for years. At the hospital, returning to full-time trauma nursing felt like stepping back into a world where my skills mattered and my voice wasn't dismissed. My coworkers welcomed me with the kind of warmth that made my throat tighten. "We missed you, Maddie. You look lighter." Sometimes it felt strange how ordinary life continued, even as mine had been upended. But then I'd walk past the domestic violence center 2 blocks from the bus stop, the sign in the window catching the corner of my vision, and I'd pause. The first time I stepped inside, it wasn't to volunteer. It was because something inside me needed to be in a place where pain wasn't minimized or canceled out by excuses. The director, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, offered me a seat and a cup of tea. I told her I was a trauma nurse. I told her what I had survived. I asked if they needed volunteers. She smiled as if she had been waiting for me. We always need people who understand the truth from the inside. I began spending Saturdays there, not rescuing anyone, not lecturing, just listening, helping women document injuries, teaching them how to create timed logs of incidents, explaining how police reports worked, sitting with them in waiting rooms. I did for strangers what no one had done for me, and strangely, it healed something I didn't know was still broken. My parents called relentlessly for the first 2 weeks. I ignored every call, every voicemail, every tearful apology that wasn't really an apology. Then the calls slowed, then stopped. But silence from them wasn't peace. Peace was waking up in a place where no one yelled my name like a threat. Peace was coming home after a 12-hour shift to a space that didn't feel like a battlefield. Peace was cooking scrambled eggs at midnight because I felt hungry and free at the same time. Peace was walking to the riverbank on Sunday mornings with coffee and watching joggers pass by, nobody knowing anything about me except that I looked like a person minding her own life. 3 weeks after moving in, my mother texted, "Your father and I want to talk. This has gone far enough." For the first time, the message didn't make my stomach drop. It didn't tighten my throat. It barely brushed the surface of my calm. I waited 2 hours before responding. Truth first, then maybe a conversation. It was the first boundary I set without trembling. Her reply came minutes later. "Why are you being cruel? Not surprising. Not new." But this time, instead of shrinking, I set my phone down and opened my window, letting the cool March air sweep into the room. I made tea. I sat on the edge of my bed. I read a book. Each minute of not responding felt like reclaiming another inch of myself. At the hospital, I earned a new reputation. Calm under pressure, steady, empathetic. Patients relaxed when I walked into the room. Families trusted me. My supervisor pulled me aside one afternoon and told me a slot had opened on the trauma response team. "We think you would be perfect for it." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I felt the shift inside me like a foundation setting into place. Not because of the job, but because someone recognized my capability without comparing me to anyone else. After accepting the role, I walked home in the late spring air, the city humming softly around me. I passed a bakery, bought a slice of peach pie, and ate it at my kitchen table while sunlight poured across the floor. For once, sweetness didn't feel undeserved. One evening, I received a message from Ariana. It was simple. "I am sorry. I left before things got worse. I hope you are safe." At first, I didn't know how to respond. Then I typed a short message. "I hope you and the baby are safe too." I didn't owe her forgiveness, but compassion was something I could give freely now that it was no longer demanded from me. As April turned to May, my life took on a rhythm I had never known. Work, volunteering, quiet mornings, slow evenings, no shouting, no slammed doors, no forced explanations, just presence. One night, standing on my balcony while rain misted the air, I realized something profound. I was not waiting anymore, not for apologies, not for someone to see my worth, not for a family to become what it had never been. I was building a different kind of life, a gentler one, a sturdier one where the word peace did not feel foreign. Boundaries were no longer walls, they were doorways. And for the first time, every doorway led forward. Spring arrived quietly in Pittsburgh, not with the dramatic flair of movies, but with small shifts that only someone rebuilding her life would notice. The mornings were brighter. The breeze no longer cut through my jacket like a warning, but brushed my skin like a reminder that seasons change whether you are ready or not. I found myself walking along the river before work coffee warming my palm, watching boats drift lazily along the water. Peace had taken root in my life the way seedlings push through soil slow but persistent, until one day you realize the landscape has changed. On a Tuesday morning, just as the sunrise painted soft gold across the water, my phone buzzed with a message from my Aunt Lynn. Jason was arrested again last night. His new girlfriend called 911. My steps faltered, gravel crunching under my shoes. The river glimmered behind a thin veil of morning fog as I stood completely still. There it was, the truth in its most unvarnished form. Not my fault, not my burden, not the result of anything I had done or failed to do. A pattern repeating because the person at the center of it refused to change. My aunt's message continued. "Your mother is frantic. She says they do not know what to do. They wanted me to call you." I read the words twice. Then again. A younger version of me would have responded immediately, rushing back into the role of fixer-peacekeeper emotional shock absorber. A younger version of me would have believed that I could stitch together a wound that was never mine to carry. But now I knew the truth. I texted back only one sentence. "I hope they find the support they need." Then I put my phone in my pocket and kept walking. The air smelled like rain. A train rumbled softly in the distance, and I felt nothing except a quiet certainty that I had stepped off a path that had swallowed years of my life. Later that afternoon, after a long shift in the trauma unit, I walked out of the hospital with aching feet and a mind buzzing from adrenaline. But instead of going straight home, I paused outside the building, looking up at the tall windows glowing in the dusk. This place had become my anchor, not because of the chaos inside, but because here I mattered. Here, my voice was not dismissed. My boundaries were not questioned. My reality was not rewritten to protect someone else. I took a slow breath and felt the weight of years slide from my shoulders like a cloak I no longer needed. Outside the sliding doors, the evening air wrapped warmly around me. I began walking toward the bus stop when my phone buzzed again, a number I did not recognize. For one brief second, I hesitated, then opened the message. It was from my mother. "Maddie, we heard what happened to Jason. We are overwhelmed. We do not know what to do. Please talk to us. Please come home." The words were familiar, soft in the way only manipulation could be. But beneath the softness lay the same expectation that I return to the role they had assigned me, that I should step back into the orbit of their chaos, carrying blame that was never mine. My thumb hovered over the screen, but only for a moment. Instead of replying, I opened the photo folder where I kept my evidence. Pictures of bruises, screenshots of messages, copies of court documents, the police incident report, the temporary protective order. Proof of everything they had denied. I scrolled through the images slowly, my breath steady and unshaken. Then I closed the folder and set the phone aside. I sat on a bench near the hospital entrance, the city humming around me in soft, familiar notes. How many years had I spent thinking my worth was tied to holding a family together? A family that had never tried to hold me. I leaned back against the bench and let my eyes drift shut. Forgiveness had always been held up as some golden standard, the thing you were supposed to aim for if you wanted to heal. But as I sat there listening to cars rolling through evening traffic and voices floating from the sidewalk, I understood something deeply and without hesitation. Forgiveness was not required for freedom. I did not need to hand out absolution like a gift wrapped in ribbon. I did not need to open a door just because someone knocked. My healing did not depend on pretending the past had not happened. It depended on refusing to let it control the future. When I opened my eyes again, the sky had shifted to deep blue, threaded with the first stars of the night. I stood slowly, stretching the stiffness from my muscles, and started walking home. On the way, I passed the domestic violence center where I volunteered. Its windows were dim lights off for the night, but I paused anyway, resting my hand against the door frame. Here was a place where truth was not an inconvenience, where pain was not minimized, where people were believed. I smiled softly, knowing I had become part of something bigger than the worst thing that ever happened to me. I reached my apartment as the city lights flickered awake. I unlocked the door, stepping into the quiet warmth of a home built entirely on my choices, my boundaries, and my well-being. I left my shoes near the door, made a cup of mint tea, and sat by the window, watching the soft glow of street lamps spill across the pavement. My phone buzzed again, but I did not look. Instead, I let the sound fade into the room like background static. I lifted my mug, inhaling the warm scent, feeling the steady beat of my own pulse. I had survived a house built on denial. I had walked away from a family that demanded my silence. I had chosen truth over image, safety over loyalty, myself over them. When I finally picked up my phone, I did not type a message. I did not explain. I did not negotiate. I simply pressed block. The screen blinked for half a second. Then everything went quiet. Outside, the wind rustled through new leaves. Inside, my chest loosened with a peace I had never known. Freedom was not loud. It was not triumphant. It was a soft, steady breath you finally get to release after years of holding everything in. I set my phone down, wrapped both hands around my tea, and looked out into the night, knowing with absolute clarity that the life ahead of me would be defined by something far stronger than forgiveness. It would be defined by freedom. In the quiet after a storm, when the shouting has stopped and the doors that once slammed are now far behind you, there comes a moment when you finally hear your own heartbeat again. Not the echo of someone else's demands, not the rhythm of walking on eggshells, but the steady, grounded truth of your own life calling you back to yourself. If you have ever loved people who used your silence as their shelter, if you have ever carried the weight of a family's secrets on your shoulders because you were the strong one, the peacekeeper, the one who was expected to endure so others could avoid accountability, then maybe Maddie's journey resonates with you more than you expected. Maybe you know the feeling of leaving a house that never felt like home. Maybe you know what it costs to finally choose yourself. And here is the truth. No one tells you choosing peace is not cruelty. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. Walking away is not weakness. Sometimes the most courageous act of your entire life is simply refusing to play a role you never agreed to in the first place. Healing is not tidy. It is not linear. It does not come wrapped in warm apologies or perfect endings. Sometimes healing looks like moving into a tiny apartment with secondhand furniture and learning little by little that silence can feel safe. Sometimes it looks like blocking a number with hands that still shake. Sometimes it looks like realizing that forgiveness is optional, but freedom is necessary. And if you are listening tonight from a place of recovery or resistance or quiet rebuilding, I hope you remember this. You are allowed to rewrite the story. You are allowed to walk toward a life measured not by who you protect, but by who protects you. You are allowed to choose peace without explaining why you need it. And you deserve a life where your voice is not an interruption, but a truth that stands on its own. So take a breath. Look at where you are now. not where they wanted you to stay. And if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of a chapter you survived or one you are still trying to escape, I'd love to hear where you're listening from tonight. Sometimes the first step toward freedom is simply saying out loud or in the comments, "This is what I walked through." Because stories like these are not about revenge. They are about reclamation, about dignity, about choosing yourself even when no one else ever did. And maybe that is where your story begins too.